Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the IMMUPHARMA PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just please simply type in your questions at any time and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question received during the meeting itself. However, the company review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. Before we begin, we would like to submit the following poll, and if you would give that your kind attention, I'm sure that would be most appreciated by the company. And I'd now like to hand over to Chief Operating Officer Tim Franklin and Chief Executive Officer Tim McCarthy. Good morning or good afternoon to you both.
Good afternoon, Mark. Thank you very much for that introduction. Let me say good afternoon to all the listeners. Thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to the presentation today. As an introduction, I'm sure you're all aware that we put an RNS out yesterday concerning a fundraising which we're going through, and I'd like to come back to that and maybe talk a little bit more about that at the end. But we thought we'd take the opportunity to make the presentation today, Tim and I, just to bring you up to speed with where we are with the company, what we see as a very exciting future going forward, and put the whole fundraising into context, because we're clear in a period now, if you've read the RNS, where everyone has the opportunity to participate in the fundraising, which is something we felt very strongly about, giving people the opportunity to do. So having the background of doing the presentation today for anybody that may be thinking of making investment, we thought was very important. So we're going to share the presentation between us. So I think I've got control of these slides somewhere. So that the disclaimer, and this is the team. So I think depending how well you know the company, you'll be more or less familiar with us. So there's myself as Chief Executive Officer. I also currently hold the role of Chairman as well from before, if you're familiar. And that, just to put that in context for anybody that doesn't know the company that well, we had a change around of the board and the management team just about a year ago now. And I was non-executive chairman at the time, and I took over as Chief Executive Officer. Tim was on the board, but he became Chief Operating Officer at that time. So we're the two executive directors, and then we've got Sanjeev, who joined the board last year together with Lisa. Lisa, a lot of you know anyway, because she's been with the company for a long time as head of investor relations. Sanjeev, who you probably wouldn't necessarily know, but he's a surgeon by background, worked in the NHS, but he's also had a commercial career and has run as a CEO an AIM company himself in the sector. And Eva, who's our CFO, although she's not formally on the board. So where are we in terms of right? So I'm just going to adjust my screen so I can see. Hopefully you can still see me, but so I can see the presentation. So an overview of the company. We are listed on the UK AIM market. We have been now for over 10 years. And our expertise is very much in developing peptide-based drugs. And we have two areas that we concentrate on. And this is very much how Tim and I in the last year have focused the company on two specific areas where we believe that we can be successful and where we can add real value. So we split those two areas into autoimmunity and inflammation, and separately infection. A lot of you will know the company through what we call the P140 platform, and specifically the drug we call Lupusor. And that is in a very exciting stage at the moment. We're just about to move into a phase 3 study, a second phase 3 study for that drug later this year. And that's giving us a lot of momentum going forward. And that drug is partnered with a company called Untitled for the US rights. And I emphasize the US rights because we as a company still have all of the rights to exploit that drug in the rest of the world, which will be a source of more commercial deals as we move forward. And then under that overall platform that we call P140, there are different indications which we are able to develop. And the one that we're focusing on at the moment is in CIDP. And that one, because of all the data which we've already collected through preclinical studies and clinical studies, with the same product in lupus, we are able to put that indication straight into what we call an adaptive phase 2A3 study. So it's a very late stage study, and Tim will speak a little bit more about that indication and the opportunity there as we get further into the presentation. But it's just a demonstration of how we have in the last 12 months refocused the portfolio, brought forward those opportunities which we believe can add value very quickly. And there are other indication opportunities within the P140 platform, other than just lupus and CIDP. And in the anti-infective area, we have 2 products which we'll concentrate on, which again, Tim will come back to later in the presentation. So where we are at the moment, and really the basis of the fundraising which we've just launched, and what I'd like to sort of emphasize to everybody who might be thinking of investment is why do we believe as a management team it's a good opportunity at the moment. So I mentioned that we changed the business around a year ago. We have done an awful lot of work in those 12 months in terms of streamlining the company, reorganizing the corporate structure, a massive reduction in the overhead costs that was there previously in the company, and perhaps more importantly for adding value for shareholders, become more commercially focused. So we will definitely over the next period be looking to do some more licensing deals, out licensing deals, one on Lupusor for lupus, for the rest of the world rights. The CIDP has already started garnering a lot of interest because it's a late stage product and there's such a lot of data on it through what we've been doing with lupus. And even in the earlier stage programs, the anti-infective programs, we've already got some outline interest from commercial partners. And this is something which, as a company, we have not done very much of in the past. Some of you know the history of the company will know that the Lupusor product was licensed out to Cephalon about 10 years ago, and they were going to take that all the way through. That didn't happen because they as a company got taken over, and we took the rights back, which in retrospect meant that we ended up with a product which is now in late stage, will add an awful lot of value going forward, and that's just the way it works sometimes. But the Avion, who we partnered Lupusor with a couple of years ago now, are fully behind this. They are fully paying for the trial, which will be an international trial, so we can use all the data from that phase 3 trial for other areas in the world as well, not just the US. And we've been working with them very closely over the last couple of years, and we built a very good relationship up with them. And as you may or may not be aware, but I'm sure you are if you're following the company, we have an expected response from the FDA at the end of this month, which after that, both Avi and ourselves are looking forward to starting the phase 3 trial. The comparison, I think, which we would like you to look at is to look at our company with all of the portfolio we have and the late stage products, and especially Lupusor being in phase 3, and look at the valuation we're currently at, which is less than £20 million. If you look at that on a comparative peer-to-peer basis, and when I say peer-to-peer, try and look at companies that are similar in shape to IMMUPHARMA, with a late stage product which they own themselves. That frankly there aren't that many. I mean, if you look in the US, there's quite a few to compare, but certainly in the UK or even in Europe, there aren't many companies that have a similar profile, and all of those companies are valued at a much higher level than we are. Now, you might ask why, and since we took over last year, I've been on various webcasts and presentations and been quite honest about it. The company didn't deliver. It didn't deliver on a number of levels in terms of we didn't get through the first phase 3 of Lupusor successfully, and there's reasons for that, and I'll let Tim explain when we come on to that later in the presentation. But we didn't deliver on anything else. We haven't done any other commercial deals. We haven't developed the portfolio in the way that it should have been developed, and we've been perfectly honest about that. We can't hide away from that fact, but we have spent an awful lot of time and effort in the last 12 months in turning that around, and we're just on the brink of something really special here with the company. It's also worth mentioning the partner that we have in the US. We did a fundraising in December, which Avion participated in. And I think it's important for me to say at this point that Avion are not an investor. They are a developer and a pharmaceutical company, very much like we are. And that's why they're very interested in the drug, because they're very excited about Lupus potential in the US. When they invested in December, it was very much a conversation that I had with the CEO of Avion. And he said to me, I didn't approach him. He said to me, Tim, would you accept an investment in your company? Because I want to show support. We're not an investment company, so don't think we're going to continue to invest in a similar way. But at this point that you've just taken over, I totally underwrite your new strategy. I totally underwrite the new team. We have confidence in you. And, I'd like to be alongside you and support you and just put a little investment in and show our support. And that actually meant a lot to us. And so Avion are an equity investor in the company, but that's not their day job. Their day job is developing drugs, and that's what the most important and exciting thing to me is, that they're really sort of jumping at the bit to get on with this phase 3. So we're all in the same mode. So an overview of the portfolio, just before I hand over to Tim to go through some of the detail. It's very much as I've just laid out. You have the two areas, the autoimmunity, anti-inflammatory, and the anti-infective. Lupus drug, which is based on the platform which we call P140. I mentioned lupus, I mentioned CIDP. There's another example there. We've got some really good preclinical data on asthma, for example. So this technology platform could be one that produces an awful lot of different opportunities for drugs in the future. And very much our R&D team based in Bordeaux are not only supporting the lupus program, but they're very integral to the anti-infective portfolio which we're developing here. And although you see it on this screen as preclinical, I think Tim will explain that it's not to be looked at really in terms of the opportunity in the development stage as a pure preclinical. It's something which we can fast track through, or with a partner we can fast track through to add value very, very quickly. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Tim. So if you wouldn't mind picking up from here, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, sure. So clearly the lead indication for us is lupus, for Lupuzil, P140, as it's also known by. So what is lupus? At the moment, it's a chronic infection because all the therapies that are given don't stop the course of the disease. So they're on therapy pretty much for the rest of their lives. It can be life-threatening if there's certain organ involvement, for example, the kidneys. And it's essentially a disease where you're attacking your own DNA. So the effect could be on any of the organs of the body. The disease is pretty much out of control immune response, and it affects the skin. There's a very typical lupus presentation. It's more prominent in women than men. It can affect the joints, so it's very similar to rheumatoid arthritis in that way. It's very painful in the mornings, especially. It can affect the kidneys, as I mentioned, blood cells, liver, heart, and lungs. It can even cause premature menopause, which is obviously a very significant issue for many younger women. The issue for lupus is that in terms of therapeutics, is we need something that's essentially a lot safer and more effective for patients. The current drugs which are approved specifically for lupus, Benlysta and Safnello, have, although very effective in certain segments of patients, have some very serious side effects which are illustrated on the prescribing information sheets for healthcare providers. So they have very limited use at the moment in a very small number of patients, but nevertheless, combined, those two drugs are selling over $1 billion worldwide at the moment. The mainstay and the largest volume for therapy in this indication is steroids and antimalarials, which are not specifically approved for this disease, but are used off-label in a lot of patients to try and manage the symptoms as best as possible. But we all understand the issues and safety issues, especially with taking steroids and even antimalarials long term. The size of the market is around 5 million worldwide. And in the US, for example, is still massively underserved. There's probably around about 100,000 to 200,000 patients that we could potentially target with our drug alone, and that's not the whole market. So why do we call P140 Lupuzor a paradigm shift in lupus therapy? Well, apart from the fact that it's a lot more patient-friendly than taking therapy every day and trying to remember therapy every day, or having to go in for a long infusion process at a hospital or the specialist practice. It's a simple once-a-month injection under the skin. It's targeted, so this comes back to why why we're different, and why the last clinical trial didn't deliver what we were hoping for. The reason for that is that the last trial was designed in such a way that it didn't capture all those patients that would potentially react better to therapy. And this is what we mean by a theranostic biomarker. When we looked at the last trial, we could see that if that trial had been enriched and patients had been selected on the basis of a specific biological marker, they had more chance of responding more favorably to P140. We also know that P140 is very safe. It's been looked in over 300 patients exposed to the drug to date. And we know that it's not an immunosuppressant, as are the current approved drugs. It doesn't suppress the immune system, it recalibrates the immune system due to its unique mechanism of action, which is distinct from the other therapies. There are no interactions with vaccines, so that's, it's not affecting the immune system in such a way that you can't be vaccinated, or it won't affect recent vaccinations to other drugs. And it's a completely natural approach. The peptide, which is a very small sequence of amino acids, is naturally present in a protein that acts within this natural recalibrating mechanism, if you like, within the body. So the natural approach clearly is more appealing, and that's probably why we've got very good safety data so far. However, which way you cut the forecasts, I mean, clearly we can't define price just yet, but you could quite easily see a potential of 2 billion worldwide global sales. But that's, I mean, it does get academic after a while trying to look at those figures, but it's clearly a large commercial potential for us. So behind that, and that study, we're looking to start that as soon as we can, once we've had the FDA written response at the end of August. Behind that, we have CIDP. The mechanism by which P140 works in lupus is also connected to a number of other disease states. CIDP being one of those. Our inventor and lead immunologist and key collaborator, Professor Muller, has also done a lot of work in animals to show that it also works, P140 also works in CIDP. And the inflammatory effect of this disease causes loss of myelin from around the nerves. So this is like the insulation around nerves, and when that starts to break down. So it's a neurological disorder. It causes pain and dysfunction in the nerves, and it causes a progressive weakness and impaired function in the limbs over time. It is likened to MS in many ways, but the flaring and relapse rates are very predictable for CIDP, whereas they're more random for multiple sclerosis. So it's a similar type of disease, similar debilitation. So it comes and it goes, but over time it's still progressing, if you like. The only therapy at the moment for this, which is widely used, is intravenous immunoglobulin. And this requires the patients to go to hospital visits every 4 to 6 weeks. And they have to sit there for several hours to have this intravenous infusion. The prevalence is low, but the medical need is very high. So it's a typical orphan drug type indication. So few patients, but a very high price. So, for example, if you take the midpoint of 0.7 to 10.3 cases per 100,000, there's probably around about 20 to 30,000 in the US. But you can imagine with the orphan drug type prices, this clearly leads to a great opportunity commercially. So we have the opportunity here, because of the mechanism of action of P140, to slow the progression of the disease for the first time. There's the potential to do this, and this is what we're looking at in the design of the protocol. We're looking to reduce the relapse and remission frequency. And clearly, if we can do that, then there'll be less need for patients to come in the future for intravenous regimens. It's more patient-friendly. Again, it's going to be very much the same as the lupus approach, with once-a-month injections under the skin. We know it's safe at similar doses that have been used, or exposure levels, if you like, that have been used in lupus. And the phase 2A/3 adaptive study allows, because of the size of the population of patients and the style and type of the design of the study, it is possible to do this in one study, a study that we can submit to the regulators for approval after just one study. And this is called a phase 2A/3 adaptive pivotal trial. And so the next stage, once we've approached the regulators regarding this design, is to seek IMD approval and for orphan drug designation. And this will allow us to aim for that particular population. Again, with lupus, whichever way you cut it, it's a big opportunity. But at the moment, we're looking at something that could potentially be 750 million global sales potential. There are a number of companies, just coming back to the business development ideas, that are very interested in not only orphan drug indications, but neurological disorders and neuropathies, as they're known. So we know there's a big appetite out there for therapies that can deal with this in a safe, simple, and effective way. And so on to anti-infectives. Actually, before I say that, I should also add that, it doesn't stop at lupus and CIDP. There will be further indications that we're looking at based on the preclinical work that's been coming out of Professor Muller's activities. So anti-infectives is the other secondary key area. And yes, when you look at the portfolio, the pipeline timelines, it is earlier on. But what we're trying to do here is take existing anti-infectives, which are very, very effective, highly effective, some of the best actually. So here we've got amphotericin B modification called BioMB, and the other one is Biocina, it's the vancomycin alteration. And what we're trying to do here is not make tiny adjustments, but to make drastic changes in their pharmacology, the way they work, which will provide much better efficacies. It'll overcome some resistance issues that we're seeing out there. And so, for example, BioMB, we want to reduce the toxicity associated with that. When a patient receives amphotericin B at the moment, they go into very high fever. There's very severe organ damage, kidney damage in up to 15-20% of patients with some of these formulations. So there's a huge opportunity to work on that unmet need for patients receiving amphotericin B. And not only that, but amphotericin B is typically used in what they call chronic aspergillosis infections, and a very tiny fraction of that is currently being served by existing amphotericin B because of the safety issues. So it's been reserved to third or fourth line. If one can improve on that and improve on the first line resistance with other therapies, then there's a great opportunity to not only hit the existing market, but to expand that as well. And at the moment, the market, the sales for AMP-B are around about $600 million worldwide. But we see there's a bigger opportunity there in the existing market. Biocina, as I mentioned, this is amphotericin B is antifungal. and Biocina is an antibacterial. Vancomycin is very widely used at the moment, but there are issues with this. It can only be used for certain bacteria types, positive and not negative, and so there are tox issues with that as well, absorption issues orally. So there's, again, as I said before, there are gaps here for both of these where we can deliver, some real improvements. And the WHO itself is very, very concerned about increased antifungal resistance. It's one of the biggest threats to global health. Yes, of course, viruses like COVID are extremely dangerous, but what we've also seen as a result of COVID infections, it's a secondary infections and diseases which really start to hit people. For example, I don't know if any of you have looked at the black lung disease reports during COVID. This was due to aspergillosis, and amphotericin B was being used there to, one has to think of not just where we are today, but with the concerns that, any more viruses like this and mutations around that could lead to the need for better antifungals and better antibiotics, antibacterials. And the reason why we're not including antivirals in our therapeutic approach is because that, there's many specialists doing antiviral research, and I think we'd be better placed to offer something different in the market, which is what we're trying to do. And I think it's back to you, Tim, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Tim. So really good overview from Tim there of the portfolio. And I say again, as I did earlier, that those of you who know the company, who've known the company for a while, hopefully will see the difference that the portfolio offers now. And of course, that speaks very well to this particular slide, because we are determined to drive the value of this company up and give the return to shareholders, especially those shareholders that have been with us for year after year after year and are born with the ups and downs. And there's been quite a lot of downs recently rather than ups, and we all know the reasons why. And for a business like ours, the only way that you can drive value is to get, one, the development programs moving forward, and then in turn convert that into some sort of commercial success, whether it be through licenses or whatever way. And as I mentioned earlier, that's what's been sadly lacking in the past. So the key to that, as far as the market is concerned, as well as the share price and getting the valuation up, is news flow. That's our currency, if you want to put it in that way. And we have a very rich seam of news flow coming up the remainder of this year and into next year. So let's say the next 18 months. And obviously what everybody's focused on is the start of the phase 3, the second phase 3 for lupus or lupus. And our expectation, Avion's expectation, is we get that started as early as possible after we get the response from the FDA at the end of this month. So really, really exciting period we're coming into, and we're all looking forward to it. Tim mentioned about the CIDP study. We've done a lot of work over the last 12 months in getting that in good shape with advisors and specialists in the area. We have a full protocol that we have developed with the help of our advisors. That's been backs and forwards, and that's in pretty good shape. We're not far off, actually, putting a submission in for IND to, I think our first regulator will be the FDA. So again, that's a big step forward, because once we've done that and we've got approval to start a study, not only does it allow us to move that development on, but that is the key point at which potential partners or licensees that we've spoken to already, want to see, and that could very well, in its own way, lead to a commercial deal of some sort. So then you go on to that's the second half of this year. The first half of next year, we are very much looking to do some licensing on the lupus and indication for lupus or for the rest of the world, and also CIDP, which I've just mentioned. So the triggers there will very much be the start of the phase 3 for lupus and getting the IND and the orphan drug status for CIDP. And as you can imagine, that ticks a lot of boxes for potential commercial partners. And then we'll actually start the CIDP, we're expecting the first half of next year as well. And then in the second half of next year, we go back to the anti-infective portfolio and the Bioimd especially. Between now and then, we will be running some studies ourselves, just to confirm some of the data we've already seen in that program. And again, that is attracting an awful lot of attention already. So our intention is to run one more study on that to confirm what we've already seen, but also just to add a little bit more data into that package, which makes it that much more attractive and valuable for when we go to out-license that drug. So if you look over the next 18 months, which is not that long a period, there's some pretty chunky bits of news there, all of which will drive the valuation in the right direction. And to just try and illustrate in one way how we've seen in the past the share price of IMMUPHARMA react to development news and progression. This is a share price graph which some of you may be familiar with. You can see that for many years the share price languished. And where you see that spike when it goes up to the 178, the progression of that share price was very much when we started the first phase 3. And if you've been a long-standing observer of IMMUPHARMA, you'll know that our strategy during that was to keep the market informed on a regular basis in terms of patient recruitment, just confirming we weren't getting any side effect issues coming through as we went through the recruitment and then obviously the operation of the study. And as we moved nearer and nearer to the completion of that study and the deliverable of the results, you can see where that share price rose. And we expect that to happen again. The difference this time is we have learned an awful lot, as Tim mentioned in his presentation, about why that first phase 3 failed. We've had experts look at it. We've had Sylviane, Professor Muller look at it. We've looked at it. We pulled it apart and put it back together again. And the simple way of putting this is it was a failed trial, not a failed drug. The drug works. We could see the drug worked in the first phase 3. We just weren't able to get the statistical significance that we wanted. However, if you split the first phase 3 into 2 parts, when I say the 2 parts, it was one whole clinical study, but there was a US element to it and there was a European element to it. And when you look at the European results on their own, we actually got statistical significance. So if we'd just run the study in Europe, we would have passed that phase 3. However, in the US, it was the opposite side and we didn't get statistical significance. And the difference being that the level of patients in the European cohort with this particular biomarker, which we are now concentrating on, was something like 66%, so 2/3 versus 1/3 in the active group that had this biomarker. And because of that high level of patients with that biomarker, they were able to react better to the drug, and then compared to the placebo comparator in that group, they showed statistical significance. In the US, it was completely the opposite way around. It was 1/3 of patients which had the biomarker, 2/3 which didn't, and a stark comparison that we didn't meet the statistical endpoints in the US, and that was the reason. Now, if you look at the phase 3 protocol that we've agreed with FDA, we agreed the phase 3 protocol with FDA last year. We announced that, so that isn't in doubt. We have concentrated, and the FDA agree with us, that we concentrate on recruiting patients in this next study, only those patients that have the biomarkers. That is what we call a key part of the patient inclusion criteria. That is going to make an enormous difference to the probability of success of this next phase 3. We've also made other little changes because you always learn something from clinical studies, whether they're successful or not successful. So there are other subtle changes as well in the protocol going forward, and it's going to be a bigger study in terms of more patients, which makes the outcome more predictable. So we've got a high confidence level in going into this phase 3 later this year. And coming back to this particular slide, what we expect to see is that there'll be an anticipation as we move through that study, as we saw last time, and the share price should react. The additional thing we have this time round, though, and I go back to the portfolio, and I always believe in the portfolio rather than a one drug company. We have all the other drugs, the other indications in P140, the anti-infectives, that will also be going through their development phases to drive more interest and more value accretion points. And we have the whole commercial story, which we haven't had before. So you add all of that up, and the milestone slide, which I explained just previously, you look at the way the share price has reacted before and the value we created before, that is what we're anticipating will happen going forward. Now, I think I've probably covered this in my explanation of the phase 3 and why we're very confident of the new phase 3 going forward. And yeah, just to finish that off, it's very important also, and it's very supportive, the fact that FDA have looked through this with us, and they know development as well as anybody, the FDA, because they do it for a living, clearly. And the fact that they have agreed with the protocol and the way that we refocus the patient inclusion criteria, the way that we're running the study, that gives us a lot of confidence, as I say, that it's not just our opinion. FDA recognize why we've made these changes. They recognize why the previous study failed. That's all really, really important going forward. So just to try and wrap up, and just to remind you, this is actually the slide that we presented right on the beginning of this presentation. I'm not going to run through each bullet point because you've heard it before, but I just stand back and I say we've got a company here which is valued currently at less than £20 million. We have a phase 3 with a high probability of success about to start. We have a portfolio of other drugs which we can fast track through, a number of commercial deals coming up over the next period. All of this, I'm sure you will understand and recognize, will add tremendous value. And it's something different than what the company was doing even just before a year ago. So we have to recognize that the company is changing. We put our hands up previously. I'm doing it again today to say we didn't get it right previously, and we suffered because of that. The share price suffered. We didn't deliver on what we should have delivered. That's why the share price is where it is. I get it. All the board gets it. We're not trying to hide away from it. What we're trying to do is fix it. And I think we've come a long way in the last 12 months. So coming back to the fundraising, we decided to go for funding at this point because we wanted to put that cash into the other programs and keep them moving, because that is the only way you can add value. That is putting money into the programs and developing through, getting those commercial deals going. The way we have structured the deal this time, the fundraising, is different to what the company has ever done previously. And there's a certain acknowledgement, a big acknowledgement, I should say, not a certain acknowledgement, that one of the criticisms that the company has had, and actually a lot of small companies get this criticism when they do fundraisings, is there's never an opportunity for the non-institutional, either shareholders or institutional investors that come to the company new, that there's no opportunity for the non-institutional shareholders or non-institutional investors to be able to participate in a fundraising like we're just doing now. So you will notice, if you've read the RNS that went out yesterday, that we have a cornerstone investment from Landsted, who are our largest investor, and I'll come back to that structure in a moment. And then we put it out to what's called a broker option, which is open now for a week. And during that period, anybody can apply to our broker, Stanford Capital, through their own broker, because we can't take sort of non-qualifying investors or what's deemed as retail investors directly. They have to come through a regulated body such as another broker. But it's open to everybody to apply through their broker, whether they be an existing shareholder, whether they're not an existing shareholder, and they have everyone has the opportunity to invest alongside the existing shareholders And also, I should say alongside the team as well. So you may or may not notice, but as a board, we have committed £100,000 into this fundraising, and I think that's important for everyone to understand. We think it's a great opportunity, investment opportunity, but we also wanted to send the message out that we're fully behind this. We're very confident of the period coming up. And so it looked a bit odd, frankly, if we hadn't invested, but notwithstanding that, we all think it's a great opportunity. So everybody on this call, everybody out there that looks at this opportunity can apply through their broker. And I think that's right. We've had a lot of shareholders, non-institutional shareholders, for many, many years that supported this company. And it's only right that all of those people should have the opportunity to invest alongside the board, alongside Lanstead, alongside anybody else that comes in. Let me just come back to Lanstead. I know that there are criticisms, there are observations, there are comments about the structure of the Lanstead funding. We have entered into deals with Lanstead now for a number of years. In fact, this will be our fifth deal with Lanstead. And we have seen the good and the bad outcomes, if I can put it that way, of those type of deals. When we did the first deal, and interestingly, that was when I first joined the company as chairman, and we went out to raise money to run the first phase 3 study. Lanstead were a key investor in that funding, and because of the way the structure of the Lanstead deal works, because it's very much dependent on the share price, the company gained over £600,000 in addition to what Lanstead had originally committed at that time. And I emphasize, without any further dilution. So whenever we do a deal with Lanstead, the shares that we issue are fixed on day one. They don't go up or down. What goes up or down is how much money the company earns out of that, depending on the performance of the share price. So the very first deal we did with them, we actually gained. The next few deals we didn't, and that goes right back to what I've said many times, and I've said again today, that the company didn't perform. It didn't deliver. It didn't perform. Share price, stayed on the floor after the failure of the first phase 3, and there was no opportunity for the company and in turn the shareholders to gain the benefit of a Lanstead deal. We are now at the point when we're entering into a very exciting period of news flow and value accretion. Doing a Lanstead deal at this point, we've got a commitment from Lanstead for £1 million at the what's called the benchmark price, which is 6.7 pence. If we achieve everything which we are confident we are going to achieve over the next 24 months, which is the period of the deal, we will get a multiple of the initial commitment of £1 million into the company for no further dilution whatsoever. So to give you an example, if the share price went to 13, 14 pence, we're effectively doubling where we are with the benchmark. We will get £2 million out of this deal, not 1 million. I am looking for that share price to go above 14 pence, to 20 pence, to 25, to 30 pence. That every time that share price rises by 6 or 7 pence, we get another £1 million. So when people ask me to justify why we're going into another Lanstead deal, that's why. This is the right time for us to, and our shareholders, to get the benefit of this type of deal. It went against us in the last 2 or 3 years, and that's obvious, and it's obvious why. But now is the time to do this deal. And a lot of people are saying, why are you doing the fundraising now? Why don't you wait until the autumn and the share price has gone up and you've got the response from FDA? Well, the opportunity is now, for example, to take the best value out of a Lanstead type deal. It's also a great opportunity for all of our shareholders that have been with us for many years and have gone through the ups and downs and felt the pain, for all of you to be able to invest alongside Lanstead, alongside the board at this price, and get the benefit of that going forward. So I hope that I'm going to go to the Q&A in a second, see if there are any questions to answer. But I wanted to make that point because I understand why people are asking why we've done the fundraising now. Why have you done a Lansted deal now? That is the reason why. That is the basic reason why.
That's great. Tim, let me just jump in there just to give you guys a small break before looking at the Q&A. But ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just please simply type in your question and press send. But just while the company review the questions submitted already, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed from your Investor Meet company dashboard after today's event. To both of you, Tims, as you can see that you received a number of questions from investors throughout today's presentations, and thank you firstly to all of you for your engagement this afternoon. And maybe if I may, Tim, just hand back to you, and if I could ask you to read out the questions where it's of course appropriate to do so and give a response, that would be great, and I'll pick up from you at the end.
Okay, no worries. So we haven't had a chance to see these questions, obviously, because they've come in during the presentation. So Tim and I are just reviewing them now. So we'll share them between us, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. But I think, as Mark said right up front, if there are any that, you know, from regulatory perspective or whatever, that we can't answer, please forgive us. We're not trying to dodge questions, but we also want to stay the right side of the law. So the very first question that I see here, which was put on just after we started, is from Andrew. Why did the FDA ask for a PK study when the drug had already been through a phase 3 study? Were they concerned about the half-life and or the distribution? And then he's followed straight up with another follow-on question: where is the site of action of the drug? So Tim, do you want to pick that one up?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew, for the questions. So why did the FDA ask for a PK study? Well, it was a little surprising in one sense, because previously they let the FDA had been okay to allow the previous study to proceed. However, that was quite unusual, because normally a PK study is required for any drug for a clinical program. The PK study essentially shows you how the drug's absorbed, or where it's distributed, how it's metabolized and excreted, and it's a common study to do. So this is a very different FDA panel from several years ago, and they often ask different questions, and sometimes the FDA can be a little bit inconsistent like this. So it was quite a reasonable request. They essentially wanted to know if the drug was there in the blood. They could see the effects that it was having, but it's just a requirement. I don't think there was any concern about the half-life, or they just wanted to know that it was there. So they needed to be able to detect it. And then years ago also, the detection sensitivities were not as good as they are today. So, you know, that PK study that we did was, you know, highly successful. We got what we wanted out of that, and we answered the question for the FDA. I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Tim, before I go on to the site of action.
Yeah, actually, because I'm just scrolling through the questions here, and Andrew has got a further follow-on, which I think is probably, if I answer that, and then you can go on to the mechanism of action. So Andrew's also asking, what is the plan for lupus or in lupus if the FDA decide not to give the go-ahead for the phase 3 study? I think, as we said during the presentation, they have already given the go-ahead for the phase 3 study. They've approved the protocol a year ago, but at the same time, they asked us to run a PK study, which Tim has just explained. So just to sort of clear up any misunderstandings there are, we and Avion could have started that phase 3 last year. That's the simple point. But you know, when you get the FDA, the regulator who's in charge, is the gatekeeper here, asking you to do a PK study, you don't ignore that. And you know, they're asking for all the reasons that Tim has just explained, and it's pretty clear that they would prefer, they wanted to see the results of that PK study before we entered a very big and long phase 3 study in lupus patients. Now, we could have carried on, but you know, do you upset the main regulator and the person who's got the gateway to the marketplace by ignoring their request to run a PK study and just crack on without doing that study or saying we'll do it in 2 or 3 years' time. We'd have to have done it anyway before they'd give approval. So the decision that Avi and ourselves took was the best way would be to get the PK study done. You are working with the FDA then, and you then stand, a very good chance of getting the drug through to market as quickly as possible, because getting a drug to market is not just about running the study. It's about talking to the regulator, in this case, the FDA. That it's a negotiation at the end of the day. And like any negotiation, you have to do the right thing. So to answer your point, Andrew, we have already got the approval for the protocol and phase 3 study from the FDA. And that's the position, that we're trying to communicate here, that we obviously were under obligation to report the PK study results to FDA. And that's the process that we're currently going through at the moment. They're looking at those, and they're going to give their formal written response at the end of the month. So I want to just follow through that because it sort of followed on from what you were saying, Tim. But if you want to sort of flick back to Andrew's supplementary question, which is essentially what is the mechanism of action, or where is the drug working?
Yeah, I mean, thanks again for that question, because it also helps us to put into perspective the difference of therapies. So, Safnello and Benlysta are acting right at the end of a cascade of events, which starts up here and ends down here. There's lots of activities in between, and they're acting on something called B cells, and this immunosuppresses the immune system completely. P140 is binding to a protein on the surface of antigen-presenting cells called HSP8, and this is expressed very highly during autoimmune disease, during a relapse. And P140 binds to this and is internalized into these cells and helps to normalize this overactivity, if you like, before it's then sent down the cascade. So it's acting right at the beginning in a very different way that other therapies are working at the moment. And this is why, we believe that it will have, we can obviously see in the subset of data, if we know that patients definitely have a lupus flare, and they're presenting this protein on the surface of cells, and P140 is going to bind to it, it's got much better chance of actually working in those patients. And so I hope that it helps to explain the mechanism.
Thanks, Tim. Okay. Next question is from Simon. Assuming FDA approval for phase 3, is it likely the trial will complete by end of May 2024 when Dr. Zimmer's lock-in of his shares comes to an end? So just to put that in context for anybody that doesn't know, Dr. Zimmer was one of the co-founders of the company and the chief scientific officer. And when he left last year, he's got a big shareholding in the company. And when he left last year, he agreed, he wanted to send a positive message out to the marketplace that although he was leaving and retiring, he was still fully confident of the company and wanted to support it. And we and he wanted to send the message to the company that there wasn't this big overhang of shares. And the only way you can really do that convincingly is for that shareholder to enter into a lock-in agreement, which he has done for 3 years. So the question from Simon is saying, what's going to happen with Dr. Zimmer's shares? So nobody can predict exactly what the period of a study will be, but if Dr. Zimmer's, when Dr. Zimmer's shares come off the lock-in, I know that he will be very responsible. He's not about to dump his shares on the market. We speak to Robert, on a regular basis on this, and if at some point he wishes to sell some of his shares, then we will work with him to make sure that's an orderly sort of process. So if Simon, your question was about that in terms of the orderly market of a major shareholder's shares, believe me, we've had many discussions with Robert about this, and it won't be an issue in terms of whether his lock-in comes off or not. And then we have a couple of questions from Oscar. I'm just going to so we're being completely transparent here. I'm going to read them out as as Oscar has written it. So why Avion did not participate in this placing if they are so confident about Lupusor? We ended up getting pennies from shark lenders. You have promised in repeated occasions that you will deliver value for shareholders. What happened with those promises? We have been losing value month after month. And he's followed up to say, how much money is the company spending each month? Taking into account the recent placing, how long can the company keep running without the need for further funding? And then he's followed on again. Why you still haven't made a substantial investment in IMMUPHARMA if you believe so much in its promising future? So let me start to address those, Oscar. I think we have actually, because clearly you were writing this as we were doing the presentation. So I think we probably have addressed a number of these points in the presentation already. In terms of Avion, I think I explained that their investment in December was very much a one-off. I'm not saying they wouldn't potentially invest in the future again, but the value we're going to get from Avion is when they launch that drug and we start to get the milestones and the royalties, under the agreement we have with them. They are very confident. We are very confident about Lupusor. The reason why, and I think I explained this earlier on, the reason they haven't invested is because that's not their business. Their business is developing drugs and launching drugs and selling drugs and working with companies like ourselves. So I don't think anybody should take any negativity out of the fact that they haven't invested, in this particular round. Not at all. They are committing an awful lot of money to getting Lupusor to the market. So we shouldn't forget that. Your reference to shark lenders, I can only interpret that in terms of some of the funding options that we've done in the past, and I've mentioned Landsted. I've mentioned the reasoning that we've gone into another Landsted deal this time. I hope that's sufficient explanation for that one, Oscar. And then you've asked about the runway. Well, all I can say is what we put in the RNS, because I can't give anybody any more details than that. And I'm reading from the RNS now, so if you'll forgive me just reading it out, but there is a section in there that says the directors are confident that the fundraising, together with existing funding and funding arrangements, will provide the company with sufficient working capital for at least the next 12 months. If I can try and put a bit of color on that, we are always very conservative when we do our projections in terms of making that sort of statement, as one has to be. And for example, we have taken the most conservative view in terms of the funding we will receive on the Landsted deal. So as I've explained, as that share price moves upwards, then we will get a lot more cash out of that Landsted deal, which will extend that cash runway even further. But I do put it in context that if one was to look at the report and accounts for the company for previous years, you might think, wow, there's a big spend there. We have addressed that. Firstly, a lot of the spend that you see in the report and accounts in previous years was very much geared to the fact that we were running the phase 3 under our own steam. So, that's our own expenditure. So there's a lot of cash went there. We have taken a pretty severe approach to the level of overheads in the company that was present previously. And so when I look at going forward and I look at cash projections, we have a much lower level of overhead expenditure. That includes the cost of the board. And I know that's been a criticism in the past about the total cost of the board. When you see future reports coming out, you will see the cost of that board as the cost of it has come down significantly. So again, we've taken that, to heart in terms of what people have questioned before. Forgive me, I'm actually reading this as I go, so I need to read the question before I can give an answer. Right, so Mona has asked, given the market conditions and retail investors notoriously not holding stock for more than a few % profit, would a lock-in period for 24 months be more suitable for the broker option share to allow an increase in the share value without any blockage And also, how can you ensure Lanstead won't sell aggressively into any rise again, causing share price depreciation, share value depreciation as it's seen in the last 6 months? In terms of the lock-in, I don't think it's appropriate to ask people in this sort of situation to enter into lock-in. It's not as if we're a new company come to the market on an IPO, when you would expect certainly existing shareholders to maybe enter into a lock-in agreement. There was a specific reason I've just explained why we asked Dr. Zimmer to enter into a lock-in agreement. In fact, why he wanted to enter into a lock-in agreement, to show that confidence. I don't think it's appropriate to ask people to enter into a lock-in agreement at this point. And I may be interpreting your question incorrectly, but you mentioned just for the broker option, but then that would be differentiating between investors that come in or have already committed in the subscription and the placing, which is Lanstead and those institutions in the placing, who would not be asking for a 24-month lock-in, versus those people coming to the broker option. So I think there's a conflict there, and one which I don't really think is appropriate. I personally think that people, institutions, individuals investing in companies, whether it be ours or others, should be free to buy and sell their shares as they wish. And it's up to us as a company to deliver value going forward, and hopefully make sure that the share price continues on an upward track. It's never one way, but over a period of time that we add that value for the share price to appreciate. And then it should be up to every single investor, whether they be a large investor like Lanstead, whether it be a small investor that's maybe only got a few shares, and everybody in between, to to make their own decision on whether they buy or sell shares. And as I say, I include Lanstead in that because I know there's been some observations that they buy and sell shares, and that may be affecting the momentum of the share price. The bottom line here, and I keep coming back to it, but it's important that if we have the momentum in the share price, if we have positive news flow coming out, if people are reacting and recognizing the value we are adding, then the share price will look after itself. It's always an equation between buyers and sellers. And if we've got positive news flow and we're adding value and everyone is appreciating that, it will be a fact that there will be more buyers than sellers. And when you've got more buyers than sellers, the share price goes up. It's as simple as that. And personally, I don't believe in restricting people, as there's been a suggestion with lock-ins. I think that distorts the market, and it distorts what we're trying to do. And that is add value with 100% of our shareholders, albeit in this case with Robert Zimmer being a special case, should be free to buy and sell the shares as they wish. Let me see if I can see if there's any other relevant questions. Andrew, Tim, maybe you can pick this one up. Can you set out to us the patent expiry dates of P140?
Sure. In a nutshell, you can look at the sort of mid 2030 period as being the patent expiry period. So we'd expect to have at least perhaps another 10 years on the market once it's launched. But of course, one needs to remember that we are also looking at a second generation P140. So we're looking at the product life cycle management there, and trying to develop that for other indications as well.
Okay. There's a question here from David, which I'll read out, but I think, David, I probably need to clarify a few things to answer your question. So assuming phase 3 starts October 22 and you are fully recruited, how long before readout? Last time this was a 52-week trial. How long is it expected this time? I note H1 2023 in the slides. Is that for finalization and readout? So a lot of questions there, and we need to clarify this, absolutely. So assuming we start this phase 3 later this year, the first part of that is the recruitment. Recruitment doesn't happen all in one go. We are recruiting. We haven't put all the details of the new phase 3 out, but rest assured there are a lot more patients in this than were in the first phase 3, which means that recruitment will take a certain amount of time. And yes, it is a 52-week trial, but in terms of how long that trial goes on for, you've got to look at the period it takes from day one to recruiting the total number of patients in the study, because the last patient that's recruited has to go 52 weeks from there. So it doesn't all just happen. Recruitment is on day one, bang, and then 52 weeks, and then a bit after that you get your result. As we saw last time, and as we see in any clinical study, there is a period of time for recruitment, and then there is the 52 weeks from last patient recruited, and then there is a period of time to pull all the data together, and then we report. So it is very difficult to put an accurate timetable on that. But I think there may have been a bit confusion in your question. You say, I note H1 2023 in the slide. So I'm just looking again at the slide. What we're talking about in H1 23 is not the development, not the clinical study. We're talking about looking to conclude more out-licensing deals on Lupusor in lupus for the rest of the world, because the license that Avion have is just for the US. So I hope that clears up any confusion. Steve has followed on with a similar sort of point. How long will it take to get to the end point from the phase 3 P140 trial? So hopefully, Steve, you'll take the answer that I've just given to the previous question. Right, Robin, for phase 3, is there any fast track or special to reduce the time frame? I think you're talking about fast track status or special status. The trial will take whatever time it takes, as I've just been explaining. Now, we can't alter that. But going back to the amount of time it takes to deliver results and get a data package together for FDA, this goes back to my earlier point that the more you work with FDA, the better that process takes, frankly. And we and Avion are going to be on it, and we're going to continue to build our relationship with FDA. And so whilst we can't ask for any favors as such in terms of getting the product to market any quicker, I think there is a recognition that in this area there needs to be drugs like Lupusor for lupus, and we've got a lot of support from FDA on that general concept. So I think there will be a lot of momentum behind getting this drug to market as quickly as possible. Right, Mohib, I have invested over 100,000 thinking that it will sort my pension, and now down by 90k. When you talk about potential sales, is it per year or for the foreseeable future, and what percentage will the company actually receive? I can't comment on your investment, Mohib, and so I won't. In terms of the sales potentials we've put out there, that's based on a view of the size of the market, the sort of proportion of that market we could realistically hope to achieve. And our revenues are going to come from our partners. So Avion, other partners that we sign up, and as they sell the drug through, the deals that we have will involve royalties. So we've gone public with the deal with Avion, for example, to say that we will get double-digit royalties up to a maximum of 17%, which is a very, very good deal. And so, if this is selling, say it's selling $1 billion a year in the US, which is a credible target to look at, we're going to get $150 million a year in royalties straight to our top line, with no cost associated with it. So that's just one illustration of just one market, one drug in the US. I think it's as good an illustration as I can give you, but clearly with a portfolio of drugs, we're hoping that will be replicated across different territories in the world and across different drugs, that we are developing. Andrew, one for you, Tim. Thanks. What is the half-life of Lupusor?
Okay, so remember this is an injection under the skin. So it's not a tablet which is absorbed, and then you measure its half-life that way. It's injected directly into the skin. It's fair to say that the way this works is there's a delay. So we need to bear this in mind first. It's injected, it disappears, and then a week later, the immune system is doing the immune response is doing its thing. So in actual fact, you don't see any P140 in the blood after about an hour. So you see it come up very quickly, you can detect it, and then it dies off. But a week later, the T cell responses are all doing their thing. So I hope that helps to explain the question and put it in context.
Okay. I'm just flicking through the questions. I think we've covered them all. There are some repeat questions, so there's no point sort of going to those particularly. And yeah, I think we've covered it all. So, Mark,
yeah.
Hand back to you if you don't
mind. That's great, Tim. Thank you very much, and thank you for your generosity. We've gone nearly 15 minutes through the hour, so thank you for addressing all those questions that you can from investors, and thank you to everyone for submitting their questions online. As Tim said, all these questions could be reviewed post today's meeting, and any further responses will be published as it will be appropriate to do so. Tim, I wondered if I may, I know investor feedback is important to you and to the management team, and I'll shortly redirect investors on the call to provide you with their thoughts and expectations. But I wondered if before doing so, if I may, just ask you for a few closing comments to wrap up with, and then I'll send investors to give you their feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Well, firstly, let me just say thank you to all of you who've dialed in today. It's been an hour and a quarter. It's a long time to listen to anybody talk, frankly. But the purpose of the day was for everyone to have the opportunity to have a good catch up on the company. What we've been doing over the last year, a lot of which has been, under the radar screen. It's not subject to RNSs or public notices, but it's important you understand that we take this seriously. We have spent an awful lot of time and effort over the last 12 months. Tim and I, as executive directors, and the non-executive directors supporting us, and the rest of the team, including the guys in Bordeaux, and we're all geared up. We're all fired up. We're very excited about the future. We've explained in the presentation what we believe is the value proposition here. We explained why we've done the fundraising the way that we have. So, I hope this hour and a bit has been useful for everybody. It's addressed a lot of questions, addressed some criticisms which we've received, which I understand, and more than happy to follow up at a later stage. Maybe we'll do another one of these presentations, Mark, maybe in the autumn. Once we're progressing through again to update everybody. But I find the Q&A extremely useful, because we're able to address those questions straight away, and it gives us a lot of feedback as well about how people are thinking and the sort of concerns they have. So yes, thank you once again to everyone. Mark, thank you for setting this up and introducing us, and let's see where we go from here.
Great. Tim, thank you once again for updating investors this afternoon. Can I please ask investors not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect investors in order that you can provide your feedback directly to the company. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of IMMUPHARMA PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending this afternoon's presentation. That now concludes today's session, and may I wish you all a very pleasant afternoon. Thank you.